Hello and welcome. My name's Nanette Brotherwood and I'm joined later in the presentation by my colleague Iona Coates. In this video we're going to highlight where you can find online support and guidance. We're going to talk a little bit about the general marking principles, and we're going to give you some suggestions of how you can work together to moderate evidence. So the first thing we wanted to do was just to signpost some online sources of support and guidance. This is our Professional Learning Community site, or PLC, which we would really recommend to you. You need to be logged into Glow to access the site. You'll see in the home page here that we've got our support for national qualifications page, and if you click on that you'll be taken to this page, which signposts a number of useful sites and video channels, but also has links to all the latest maths guidance from the SQA. So we thought it would be worth going through some of the frequently asked questions, which you can navigate to from here. So the frequently asked questions document is really worth a read. So does the whole course need to be taught for higher and advanced higher? Given that there was optionality introduced. For higher and advanced higher, we should be aiming to teach the whole course, but optionality within assessments can remain. Unit assessments would not by themselves be sufficient to justify a grade C. A pass, where all questions are at grade C level, is not the same as a pass where there's a proportion of questions above grade C level. Regarding grade boundaries, the notional boundaries are in place for the papers on the secure site. Papers can be split, but try to ensure there's a mix of grade C and grade A questions in each chunk. Alongside the papers on the secure site, there are analysis grids which let you know which questions are designated grade C and A to make this task simpler. Our SQA colleagues have asked us to highlight that the Quality Assuring Estimates course has been replaced by a new course on determining provisional results at National 5 Higher and Advanced Higher. The course provides guidance to teachers and lecturers, departments, curriculum leaders and SQA coordinators in SQA approved centres on determining provisional results for candidates at National 5 Higher and Advanced Higher. So many of you will be making use of the marking instructions published by SQA specific to the particular qualification that you're assessing and marking. But it's important to just take some time to have a read at the general marking principles which underpin these. So these can be found at the beginning of the individual marking instructions, or by using the link on this slide. It's often easy just to skim over these, as it can look like a lot of reading. But we thought it would be worth just taking a bit of time to highlight some of the main points. So first thing is just to point out about the marking instructions structure. You'll see from the example on the slide that there are two sections, the illustrative scheme and the generic scheme. The illustrative scheme shows the methods that we're most likely to see from candidates, and sometimes there will be more than one method illustrated in this section. However, as we know, not all the learners choose the method we expect, and this is where the generic scheme would be used. The finalised marking instructions published on the SQA Past Papers site also have notes and commonly observed responses. These are added by the core marking team after candidates have completed the assessment. And I know that many of you will have added your own notes based on previous exams, but remember, it might be worth revisiting these after you've seen your pupil responses. And Iona is going to talk a bit more about commonly observed responses later in the presentation. So coming on to the general marking principles, I'm not going to go through each point, but I just want to highlight some points which I think are particularly important. So to me, the most important underlying point is that we should be marking positively. So in other words, we award marks for what the candidate has done correctly rather than deducting for what they've got wrong. And I'm sure this is something that you're all aware of, but just to be clear, there are no half marks awarded. For each bullet achieved, 1 mark should be awarded. If an error is made, then it's important to go through subsequent working. Candidates can gain all the marks following the one they've lost due to an error, as long as a valid strategy has been used and the level of difficulty is approximately the same. In general, you should only award full marks if appropriate working is shown. You will see exceptions to this in the marking schemes, and this should be used as a guide and recorded in your notes. It's important that you have a consistent approach to this. Unless it specifically says in the question, any mathematically correct method can be used. And finally, if a candidate copies incorrectly from the question paper or from within their own script, then they lose the next available process mark, as the process has not been carried out correctly. You should then refer back to the point above about follow-through marking, where all subsequent marks are available unless the transcription error has made the working substantially easier. There are several other points covered within the general marking guidance document, and for each of these areas, guidance in approaches is given. It's really important that you take time to discuss with colleagues to make sure that you've got a shared understanding and so you're able to take a consistent approach. In particular, I would encourage you to have a discussion around the questions which are shown in the breakdown grids provided as E questions. Now, at the end of April, SQA published a presentation by Kevin Gibson, Principal Assessor for Higher Mathematics, where he goes into some more detail about how the general principles apply to marking higher, and offers some more specific advice for particular questions at higher. He also details the standard method used by SQA marking team to annotate papers and highlights how using a standard approach can make moderation more straightforward. Even if you're not marking higher assessments, then I would say it's worth a look. And if you can schedule in some time to watch as a department, then it should really help to inform some of your discussions. The recording lasts just over 30 minutes, and you can find it using the link on the slide. So I'm now going to hand over to Iona, who's going to talk a bit more about commonly observed responses and a digital solution to moderation.
Thanks, Nanette. So what does moderation often look like in maths and applications of maths? Well, the key is to try to get the marking of assessment questions as close as possible to the national standard. Most candidate responses are straightforward, often those that are gaining full marks or no marks. But what about those that are partially correct? Often those fall completely within the marking instructions and therefore are also quite straightforward to mark. But as we know, there are just so many ways of going wrong, and some of these partially correct responses can be really tricky to mark consistently, and these in essence are the ones that need some discussion. Some of these responses can be quite predictable though, particularly regarding the key skills that are assessed regularly. Let's look at a couple of examples. Here we have completing the square from the 2019 Higher Paper 2. In finalised marking instructions, some questions have notes attached which are useful, such as these, which explain what to do if a candidate shows no working, and what also to do when a predictable mistake happens that simplifies the question. What you'll also see on finalised marking instructions is a series of commonly observed responses, as Nanette mentioned, where there is an agreed way of marking a particular incorrect response that has cropped up on a number of occasions in that year's scripts. Now, for this year's secure papers, there aren't any commonly occurring responses yet because the candidates haven't sat the papers. But for some more predictable questions like this one on completing the square, you might be able to create equivalent marking guidance along the lines of previous commonly occurring responses. Conversations as to how to mark these notoriously tricky questions can be really helpful for less experienced colleagues before the marking actually starts. And during the marking period, colleagues will really benefit from being able to have regular conversations about any responses that are outside of the simple marking guidance. Part B of this question is a show that question, where learners are effectively given a conclusion and asked to show why this conclusion is correct. In any such question where communication is key, these questions can be difficult to mark consistently. So it's important to discuss before marking starts what will and will not be accepted. Notes from similar questions, such as the ones shown here, can be helpful in allowing you to do this. You'll notice that vague language such as in this case the use of something squared is always 0 or larger is not deemed to match what's expected at this level. Looking at marking instructions in this level of detail, along with understanding standards materials, can help make it clear what level of mathematical rigour is expected at different levels, and can help teachers support their learners to get into good mathematical habits throughout their learning and teaching. And remember, these standards and expectations aren't important because they're in an assessment. Rather, they're in an assessment in the first place simply because they are important. Here's another type of question that might be able to be discussed beforehand. This is from the National 5 Applications paper in 2019, but it applies to National 5 Mathematics too. It's something that learners find quite hard to do, and that is to compare data sets. So in this particular set of marking instructions, only one suitable example solution is actually given. So in this case, a valid response could be, in 2016, the number of passengers who failed to turn up was more varied. You might want to think of some examples which you all agree would be alternative valid options, such as in 2017, the number of passengers who failed to turn up was more consistent or less varied. It's also helpful to think about things that you agree would be insufficient. In the same year, the National 5 Maths paper asked for 2 valid comparisons between 2 sets of temperatures. Looking at the notes of that year's marking instructions, it would appear that the responses observed were very varied indeed. These sorts of notes can, however, give colleagues a good understanding of the level of precision that's required for statistical comparisons like this. So for the assessments you're using, you may wish to include some predicted responses into some parts of your marking instructions. However, there's still likely to be some unexpected, tricky to mark responses that crop up, and this is where collecting and sharing these could be helpful. You might also find that there are errors that occur quite often. For example, learners might interpret 4.2 hours as 4 hours 20 minutes. This might generate some commonly occurring incorrect answers. It might save time to collate examples of these along with an agreed mark, particularly, for example, in National 5 applications, where there are multi-step problems, and working them through after an error can be quite time-consuming. To this end, we've produced a OneNote which mirrors the structure of this year's secure papers. If you are using these secure papers as a basis for assessment evidence covering the whole course, you might wish to use this template to collate and share tricky responses, discuss and agree an appropriate marking strategy with colleagues, and share them to save a bit of repetition and to save time and effort. This sharing might be across 2 or more schools or even a whole local authority. It might help colleagues link with others who have more experience of judging the national standard at each level. All the local authority representatives on our Principal Teacher and Faculty Head network have access to this template we've created on OneNote. So contact your representative if you would like to use this template if you don't already have access to it. If you're not sure who your local authority rep is, just drop us an email and we'll put you in touch. We thought we would just take this opportunity to signpost you towards some more recently created resources that you might not be aware of. As part of the National e-learning offer and eSchool, there have been created some ThingLink learning spaces that your learners might find useful in the final stages of their courses, or indeed throughout next year. The links on the slide and the pages that you can see here are the main pages for maths and applications of maths. But from these ThingLinks, learners can actually navigate to any of the levels and also actually to any other subject. Each ThingLink page links to a number of resources, including the West OS recorded lessons, relevant bite-sized pages, digital notes, and a number of other relevant web pages. The videos need a Glow login, but the ThingLinks themselves and the other resources generally don't. Talking of West OS, just a reminder that learners can access recorded lessons on a whole host of subjects to help with their revision. This tile is on the Glow Launchpad, and we've also given the link direct to West OS. A huge number of videos have been produced by practitioners from all over Scotland to create this valuable resource for this year and for future years. All the links from this video are available in a separate file. For further information and support, our email address is on the screen now. On behalf of Nanette and myself, many thanks for taking the time to watch this video.